Thank you very much, Ray Addison. If you were born between 1981 and 2000, your chances of owning your own home are roughly what they were for someone born shortly before 1926. Efforts to build more homes almost always run up against entrenched local opposition. My next guest believes that the way through is to build homes that are beautiful. Nicholas Boyd-Smith is founder of Create Streets, a social enterprise aimed at creating properties that people want to buy and that neighbours would welcome. He's now been appointed chair of the government's Office for Place, the brainchild of Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove. Nicholas, many thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
This sounds too good, too simple to be true. It cannot really be the case that just if you have pleasant-looking plans, nice-looking houses, that NIMBYism will disappear. This cannot be true.
Well, put in those terms, yes, nothing is as simple as that. Anyone who tells you that they've got a big, simple answer to a big, complex problem, you should disbelieve. And no, it's obviously, it is more complex than that. But at heart, there is this fundamental problem. I mean, it's well known, and I think now broadly accepted, that we don't have enough homes. We're somewhere between 1 and 4 million short, depending on how you run your economics. It's also clearly true that the British public, and this is, I think, is shown time after time after time, have lost confidence that new places, that new development will improve existing places. There was a YouGov poll done a few years ago which asked people, pretty much that question. How many of you trust developers to make new existing places better? And the answer was 2%. That's not a typo. It's 2.0. And then when planners, when I give that statistic, sound a little bit smug and say, this is why we need planning. The answer for planners is 7%. So, double, triple, quadruple, quintuple those numbers. We've lost confidence that new places will make existing places better. There are lots of reasons for that. It isn't just what a house looks like. It's what the roads are like, impact on traffic, impact on school places, impact on doctor studios. But what you see time after time is that people who in principle accept the need for new housing, and most of us do, and that's gone up over the last 10 years, when you then ask them, OK, what about these houses here, particularly near us, then they find a very wide range of reasons to disagree with it and say, and it shouldn't happen. So at heart, we need to let people fall back in love with the concept of development and of growth and of new places. And one of the key reasons for that, and I'm sure you want to dive into this, is not just what buildings look like, but what places look like.
I assumed that we got ugly houses and ugly places because they were cheaper. Can we afford things that look better?
Yes, we can. So, why do we create ugly buildings and streets? Go over the last 100 years. There's a range of reasons. One is the invention of the motor car, which pulled our towns and cities apart. Two was the invention, essentially, of modern materials. So, the cheapest thing, the very first iron-framed building in this country, an industrial building in Shropshire, is made out of, Shropshire bricks, and it looks absolutely lovely. You can now put up a shed, you're absolutely right, an aluminium shed in Bedfordshire and Milton Keynes for, a fraction of that. So, yes, you can build incredibly cheap buildings, incredibly big buildings very cheaply and very quickly. But we don't have to. We're infinitely richer in every way you count it than we were 100 or 200 or 300 years ago. One of the reasons...
Yeah, but not than 10 years ago.
We're infinitely richer than we were 100 years ago.
Yes, but not than 10 years ago. People are not at the moment going to find the extra 20 or 30 or 40,000 pounds for a prettier house.
Well, the good news is this. Because we are so short of housing, the real cost of development is not the cost of building the building, it's the cost of buying the land. So when you do have a very clear, what you might call quality ask in the planning system, and I just want to come back on how planning works in a moment, it's factored into the land price. So let's take the Cotswolds as an example. The Cotswolds have had quite a good design guide for many years, basically saying build it in Cotswold stone. That's just accepted, and depending on whether you as a developer or landowner believe that will increase or decrease the value of what you build, you just function it into what you buy for land, and it doesn't stop development. We've been running a very interesting experiment over the last 70 years in this country, when we created the national planning system post-war, where we nationalised development rights, but we were very unclear about what you could build. So it isn't strange that we regulate the built environment. We've done that for hundreds, thousands of years. The first cities in Indo-Kush, Romans, Greeks, the first extant English planning regulation I found personally, they may be older, and if historians can, is a 12th century piece of regulation from the City of London, which says quite reasonably that you can't have thatched roofs in the City of London. And because there are good, you've been a senior minister, there are big externalities. If I have a house and you have a house next to it and my house burns down, the fact you can get back to me at common law a few years later probably isn't going to make you'd probably just wish I hadn't had a thatched house.
So give me the relationship between, can we have general plans that are democratically arrived at and which govern local development? I mean, it seems at the moment that every house that's built, let alone every estate, is hugely contested. Could we have a system where we say, look, here is the general plan, and this is going to involve houses here and here and here, and we're not going to have a fight every time it's put up at the end of Acacia Avenue?
That's where we need to get to. It won't happen overnight, and again, I wouldn't want to pretend otherwise, but that's the weird experiment we've been running, where we've put almost all of the power into what you might call the development control process, i.e. that case-by-case fight. And whenever a politician tries to suggest, as the phrase I used with Roger Scruton a few years ago was, let's pull the democracy forward into the plan-making process to set what can go and what it should look like in a way agreed locally, then that does lead to a kickback. So there needs to be a collaborative process over some years where we increase our confidence that new development will make places better. And there are lots of examples of that. So there are good developments in London, around the country, that have been widely supported. That the types of things that people tend to like, strong sense of place, feels of here, not of everywhere, of anywhere. Anywhere is nowhere. Human scale enclosure, coherent complexity, buildings which have got a variety and a pattern, faces, feels like it's from here. Those are the types of places that very consistently, people don't just say, sorry, I know you're trying to get in, forgive me. People don't just say they prefer, they'll actually pay more to live in them.
Are you focusing on medium density?
I've got a phrase which I call gentle density.
Gentle density. Dan, describe what those buildings look like.
It could be anything from semi-detached houses to mansion blocks. Yes. And what you find in both the pricing and the polling data is that most of us would say, but not just in this country, in any country, that we'd want to live in a detached house. That's our sort of ideal form. But actually, in the pricing data, we'll accept trade-offs. So there are advantages of propinquity. You can walk to the shops, you can take your kids to school, you can jump on the bus to go to work, whatever it might be, which if you're living miles and miles apart from others, you don't get. There are ways, I think, to optimise those advantages of personal space, control over your own environment, your own home, your own garden. People want a garden, whilst also pulling us together slightly, and actually thus reducing the land take we need. It's a lovely research, for example, in several countries showing that if we have very modest front gardens, about the distance, perhaps a little bit more than between you and me, Michael, that actually is optimum for knowing your neighbours and speaking to them. Most of us want to speak to our neighbours, but we don't want to be forced to when we don't wish to. A modest front garden where you're trimming the roses gives you the chance to say, hello, Michael, hello, Nicholas, rather than avoiding them or never seeing them.
Do you have examples where things are presently being done well? Are there developments in Cambridge that are going well?
Well, there's some that are going OK in Cambridge. I mean, Cambridge is interesting. There has been a lot of... Cambridge is a rich part of the country, as you know. Cambridge has had technically good development, which is a bit loveless. So it's been... Loveless.
Good word.
It's faceless facades, quite expensive materials, but not always with the same texture and tone that most people prefer. There's a market for that. In all the visual preference surveys we've done lots in several countries.
If not Cambridge, where?
Well, the best one that's been done at scale... Well, the best one that's being done right now, I would say, is the Nans Lead and urban extension of Newquay in Cornwall.
Tell me about it.
So that was developed by the Duchy of Cornwall, so the King when he was Prince of Wales. It's sort of Poundbury by the sea, Poundbury 2. And they've just calmed it down a bit from Poundbury. They've used a pattern book of house types. They've shamelessly taken the Cornish vernacular, which is... The advantage is quite cheap to build. You've got sort of breeze blocks with a sort of stucco render. They've squeezed the urbanism, so it's at higher density than a volume house builder would typically do. They've actually slightly reduced the amount of parking you can put there. They've totally torn up the sort of normal approach to highways. Instead of having a distributor road or a bypass around the side, they've put a high street just down the middle. Lots of people said it couldn't be done, shouldn't be done, wouldn't be done. Last time I looked, these numbers aren't up to date. It was already selling, after only a few years, at between a 20 and a 40% premium to the local market. So they're clearly doing something right, and they're doing it actually using less land take and something that it feels like it is of here. I went and did some interviews a couple of years ago with some of the first residents, and they all said it's lovely to live in a place where we can pop round the corner to talk to people, can walk to the shops, feels like feels like it nestles in the environment. Speaking to a local green activist who runs an allotment down the valley, the sort of guy who I think it's fair to say you could imagine would be opposing new development. He was singing of its praises. It nestles in the landscapes, it feels it's of this place, but it's built to higher standards than much that we built over the last 50 years. So it's both looking back and looking forward in communion with the present, the past and the future, which surely is how we should build.
Very good. You've spoken extremely well, and you have a new job, and congratulations on that, working with Michael Gove at the Office for Place.
That's correct, thank you.
And thank you for being with us, Mrs. Boyce-Smith.